From his initial plans to shoot a sequel back-to-back with Chapter 4, to potentially bringing Robert Downey Jr. into the franchise, John Wick's director reveals the possibility of John Wick 5. Now, in case you didn't know, there was a time when Chad Stahelski was originally supposed to shoot 2 films simultaneously. The studio gave him the option to work on them together, greenlighting John Wick 5 alongside Chapter 4. And while Chad was flattered that the studio loved his work so much, he eventually decided it was too much to handle. Shooting 2 films, one after the other, was intimidating to say the least. And even though he's worked with these types of filming schedules before, he just doesn't know how to do it as a director. Stahelski's not big on breaking projects up like this either. He prefers to make one good film at a time, rather than diluting the project just to up the quantity, because he wants to make each chapter of the franchise as unique as possible. Chad would have had to reuse a lot of visual and story ideas to meet the deadline, but there's also another wrinkle in the plot that made a 5th film unlikely. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen John Wick 4 yet. Don't say I didn't warn you. Okay, so John Wick dies at the end of Chapter 4, which shows Stahelski went into this project with an endgame in mind. He put everything into the 4th installment, and he was ready to leave it all behind once it was out. The death of the main character cast some doubts on the franchise's future, and Chad wants to give his most famous creation a break for a while. You've got to understand, making 4 films set in the same universe can lead to some serious burnout. Chad has his doubts that he can make something fresh if he's not fully committed, and the last thing he wants to do is to be repetitive. His approach for John Wick 4 was to pull out all the stops and take the franchise to its limits, and it's safe to say him and his crew were extremely successful. Laying the character to rest in Chapter 4 won't only give the assassin a break, it'll also give his creator the chance to explore other projects. Stahelski's schedule is about to get packed, because he has that Ghost of Tsushima adaptation and the Highlander reboot to work on, not to mention a bunch of other stuff in the pipeline. Does this mean we've seen the last of John Wick's shadowy world? Not quite. Even though the main character's dead, the franchise will live on through several spin-offs. For starters, there's a prequel series coming to Peacock called The Continental, from the world of John Wick. I can tell from the name, it'll feature one of the many hotels frequented by John Wick and his adversaries. But the show's apparently focusing on the one we know best, the New York Continental. That means we'll get to see Winston Scott. But since the show's set in the 1970s, Ian McShane's return seems unlikely. Instead, the proprietor of the Criminal Haven will be played by Colin Woodell, who you might know from the Purge's TV adaptation. Oh, and Winston's not the hotel owner just yet in the prequel series. The show will tell us how exactly he came to be the top dog at the Continental, along with portraying an alternate history of the world. Plenty of major events occurred in the 1970s. Criminal underground, and the Continental will filter them through a John Wick lens. Just off the top of my head, the American Mafia was coming into power around this time, and sure enough, I found out that the Continental will incorporate that into the storyline. I'm assuming some big-name mobster will need Winston's help, or perhaps he'll get involved in a war between the crime families. The show won't just focus on criminal history, because there's another confirmed storyline involving the Winter of Discontent. In case you don't know, this was when massive strikes and record-breaking low temperatures brought the UK to a standstill. I personally can't wait to see what role Winston Scott has to play in all of that, so I'll be counting down the days until its September 2023 release date. Okay, this all sounds exciting, but what about John Wick himself? Stahelski's obviously on a John Wick hiatus, and the Continental's taking the franchise in a new direction, so I have to wonder if we'll ever see the assassin again. Luckily for us, this isn't the only upcoming spin-off. There's another one called Ballerina set for a 2024 release, and from what I've seen, the film will be about that homicidal dancer we saw in Chapter 3. Ana de Armas is in the lead role, but I'm mostly excited about its timeline placement. You see, Ballerina takes place between Chapters 3 and 4, which means John Wick is still alive. And before you ask, yes, Keanu Reeves will be returning to play him. John will serve as a mentor to the budding assassin played by Anna, and Chad Stahelski mentioned that his appearance will kind of be an inside joke for longtime fans. Like, the ballerina character will have no clue about Wick's backstory, so the audience will get to chuckle when she's shocked by all he can do. The film will also provide some world building for the franchise, serving the same role as the Continental in that respect. And for fans like me that still aren't over Lance Reddick's sudden passing, Ballerina will feature his last appearance as Sharon, so that's something else to look forward to. If we're getting 2 solid spin-offs, I'd say the future of the franchise is secure, but that doesn't change how much we'll miss the character that started it all. Is there any chance we'll see John Wick in his own film? I mean, we didn't technically see his body in Chapter 4, so there's a good chance that John Wick is alive. Sure, there was that whole funeral scene that seemed to confirm his fate, but who's to say he didn't fake his death? After all, burying an empty coffin might help Wick get some reprieve from the non-stop stress of the past few years. Also, the entire John Wick franchise is a tribute to the action genre as a whole, and I can't think of a more iconic action film plot device than a main character revealing he's still alive. At the end of the day, the ball's in Chad's court. To his credit, he's not exactly opposed to a 5th film, but at the same time, he doesn't want it to be a mindless cash grab. The John Wick franchise is worth billions of dollars at this point, so there's a very real possibility of the studio trying to sacrifice quality for quantity. Of course, they need Chad in the director's seat for a sequel to succeed, along with the irreplaceable Keanu Reeves. As for Chad, he seemingly needs a spark of inspiration, something that'll justify making another John Wick film. Now, Lionsgate is a business, so their main goal will always be to earn money. Chapter 4 made a lot of it at the box office, so it was only a matter of time before the studio decided to take matters into their own hands. In a 2023 earnings call, company chairman Joe Drake revealed that Chapter 5 is still greenlit. I guess Stahelski's kill the main character approach wasn't enough to stifle the studio's ambitions, and like I've said, it won't be difficult to bring John Wick back to life for another sequel. Lionsgate hasn't revealed any details about the film just yet, but they're reportedly trying to get some world building out of the way to make Chapter 5 seem organic. That'll put Chad's quality control worries to rest, and Keanu's gone on the record to say he'll stick with the character for as long as he can. That said, even if Reeves chooses not to return, Stahelski's got plenty of other big names he wants to work with. Robert Downey Jr. is just one of the many actors on Chad's wish list. He's looking for a new franchise to join after exiting the MCU, so it makes sense that Stahelski would want to bring him on, but he'll also settle for Peter Dinklage. That's right, Chad's stoked about casting the Game of Thrones actor in a future John Wick project, and he's also mentioned Peter's former castmate, Sean Bean. Outside of the usual Hollywood A-list crowd, Stahelski set his sights on some bona fide martial arts legends as well. More specifically, Jackie Chan and Jet Li. Either one would be a perfect fit for the John Wick universe, because they have tons of experience with sprawling action sequences and set pieces, and their involvement would keep the franchise fresh and exciting too. So from potentially hiring Robert Downey Jr. for a John Wick installment, to originally planning to shoot it back-to-back with Chapter 4, this was all you needed to know about Chad Stahelski, revealing the possibility of John Wick 5.